I'm Rob Sarney, and you're listening to What the Heck Fintech, where you'll experience and learn that Fintech is Fin Life. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody. We're going to have an unbelievable and a first here at What the Heck Fintech. We have a whole team with us today. We have the Gemsen team. They're doing fintech startup, doing AI work, all focused on fintech. And what they're doing is amazing. I don't want to steal their thunder, but they're hitting a big challenge that's happening, I think, for all AI across any industry, not just fintech. And so now I want to hand off to all you guys, right? So we have Charlie, we have Aoife, we have Ezra, and each of you go through, and we'll start off with you, Charlie. Give me a little background. How did you get not a real long one, because we got three of you guys, so we got to keep it tight. So I'd love to hear, how did you get to the spot you're at right now? A little bit of your background, so the audience knows the unbelievable skills you all have and how you came together as a superpower.
Thanks, Rob. Well, first off, I know everyone's super busy, so hopefully, this will be time that's interesting and well spent for your audience. But just real brief background about myself. I have been in technology for a very long time. So I started way back when, after graduating school, I started at a company called MathWorks. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how technology could actually be applied. Then after that, I spent roughly about 17 or 18 years as what they call the quantitative investor. And so a lot of time developing algorithmic trading platforms and strategies and, managing institutional money and whatnot. Then after that, I went into the startup ecosystem. That is where I first worked with Aoife. So we've been working together for roughly about 5.5 years at this point. And so had a number of roles in as an operator and as well as an investor in the startup ecosystem. And the common thread throughout all of this over the last 22 years, let's call it, is thinking about how data, helps us make decisions, thinking about how technologies helps inform what we do, thinking about the best ways to apply technologies to solve some really hairy problems. And so that's me. That's all I'll say. I'll pass it on to the other better members of our Gemsen team.
Awesome. And so Aoife, you're up.
Sure. I studied finance at Northeastern University, and then I started working in fintech startups. Ended up with Charlie at a company called Slice Data. I was the COO there. Then I pivoted a bit into venture capital, did some climate tech investing, some data science focused investing. Then did a master's in data science, which I'm almost finished. And now I'm here working with Charlie and Ezra.
Wow, that's great. Wow, so you got like that great mix to jump in there with all that great education. That's awesome. Ezra, you're up. I'd love to hear your story.
Thank you so much. Also a proud graduate of Northeastern University, many years prior to Aoife. Out of school, I actually moved down to Mexico City and worked on the stock exchange in Mexico. And I think you've had previous guests that shared their experience of being a broker on the actual floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I had that same experience in Mexico, where we would be taking orders from traders around the world, London, New York, Japan, and literally on the floor with a phone, buying and selling securities. And as we sort of think about fintech in today's world, anybody with a phone can now press a button and their trade is automatically executed. So I sort of feel like I've ridden the wave of technology and finance over the last, say, 30 years or so. After that experience, went to return back to Boston and worked for a number of quant firms, quantitatively oriented money management firms. And although we didn't use the term machine learning, effectively, we were using a lot of the sort of same techniques that people in the industry use today, which is gathering lots of data, coming up with predictions of stock prices and implementing it, using sort of a combination of both finance and data management and econometric tools. So that's how I've spent the last 25 years in that space, and Charlie and I met about 15 years ago and had a very similar orientation and philosophy and ethos when it comes to investing. And that's why this initiative and Gemsen is so interesting and compelling from my perspective.
Wow. Now, when you say phones, is it like the phone with like the cord and everything?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I mean, just so the audience knows, there's some
Right.
audience people here that are going to be going, oh,
Well,
yeah,
what is
so
it?
they must have been on a flip phone. Like, no, we're talking like
Right.
tethered to the wall, on
Yes,
cord.
absolutely. It was a very heavy phone.
That's right.
Like a Fred Flintstone phone. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Oh, and by the way, so for a lot of the things that you just talked about, we'll have other guests. We have a quant finance professor coming on in future episodes too. So you'll see that. So hey, let's get into it. Let's talk about Gemsen. Let's see what that secret sauce is. So I'd love to hear, and you guys can decide who talks. What is the secret sauce? Why? What is the business problem you're solving? And you don't have to get into detail unless you want to. What is that? So the audience knows, like, okay. And when I walked through it, I was like, wow, okay. But I don't want to steal your thunder. What is Gemsen's, that secret sauce and the thing you're going after from a business value standpoint, and how you're really adding value to whoever your customers are. You can explain who your customers are too.
Yeah, let me give you maybe a broader context, and then both Aoife and Ezra can jump in with all the stuff that I miss, because I'm sure I'll miss lots of stuff. But I'll start by saying this. Obviously, what we're seeing here today is an opportunity in terms of step change. As far as AI, the popular conversation in terms of Gen AI, agentic AI, LLMs, it's amazing, absolutely amazing, the technology and what it's capable of doing. And so we, having seen this, upfront and personal for a little bit of time, kind of really appreciate what that is. And I will set the stage by saying that's not what we do. We are a form of AI, but we are very specific in how we apply machine learning technologies. And so machine learning in of itself is a subset of AI. And so what is machine learning? It is essentially techniques that allow you to ingest massive amounts of data and in relatively transparent form, process that data and produce some type of predictive output. Okay, that's what it is at the core. And the reason why we chose to focus on this within our organization, within this particular startup, is because we actually understand that in spite of all the promise and unbelievable opportunity that relates to, ChatGPT and Claude and Grok and, all these foundational models, there is still a lot of work to be done day to day. And so what does that mean? So at least in terms of financial services, the real hard work, the gritty work that has to be done is processing massive amounts of data that's flowing through every single day, doing it securely, doing it efficiently, and producing output that is not only accurate, but producing output in a form that you can actually begin to diagnose and debug and understand because of transparency, because of what the machinery is doing. The reason why that's so important is because things will break, and you are in constant chase to evolve how good your predictions are, right? That constant chase, more often than not, requires, some really good data scientists to dig in when things start breaking down or when things start looking not quite the way they should. And that is the type of technology, and that is the technology, and that's the space where we decided we really could add value, because that workflow represents 99.9% of all data science predictive modeling that is performed today. So this is not some small niche. This is, if you have somebody or some systems touching data, you will have machine learning in the loop, period. And so that is context. I'll pass along to the other team members to provide maybe a little more color on what that actually means?
Sure, I can chime in. Yeah, so I think Charlie gave a great overview of the role of this classic type of machine learning that we're doing. And you're asking what our secret sauce is. Well, we have a fundamentally different way of doing machine learning. And so classic machine learning, you can think of a large data set, let's say 100 million rows and 1,000 columns. If you're trying to train a model on this, you're usually trying to solve for some optimization function. So you're iterating again and again and again over every single row in that data set. So think about 100 million rows, iterating over it just to train one model, it takes a long time. And so our unique insight is having this middle step. We create a data abstraction, a statistical snapshot of that data set. So we're capturing these essential mathematical elements that we can then use to train models very quickly and very efficiently. So we create this snapshot once, we make sure we have all the pieces we need to run a bunch of different model types, any target, to solve for all of those optimization functions. And then we can train on that abstraction in milliseconds. So it's a massive efficiency play, 1,000 to 10,000 times faster than training on the underlying data, with no loss of accuracy for all of those models and analytics that we support. And the other big benefit is that these structures end up being actually totally privacy preserving. So that means that instead of having access to that 100 million rows of raw data that could be transactions or individuals' accounts information, you just can access this abstraction, which is mathematically irreversible back to that row by row data. And that's been proven by GDPR and HIPAA audits. And you can explore and analyze and train models without ever touching the underlying sensitive data. So this approach, this abstraction approach, has two big benefits. One, efficiency, super fast on very little compute, and
Wow.
two, privacy preserving.
Wow. Yeah, those are always that's huge challenges, and independent of the AI scenario. I mean, that's huge just from a PII, personal identification information type stuff. That's huge. That's always a challenge in finance of when you're using the data, how you leverage the data, how do you share the data, can you share the data, and the speed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got a follow-up question. Here's my ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
What type? This might get into the customers a little bit.
Sure.
It is how much data does a customer need to have to say like, oh, we're getting crushed over here. We need Gemsen, right? To have that moment go on in their head. How big are those data sources where you're like, yeah, if you have X amount of data and so many columns and rows or whatever it is, you need us. You need us, right? What is that? Do you have like a ballpark on that?
Yeah, so it not only depends on the amount of data, but how many times, how frequently or often you're having to train on that data set. So let's say you have a big data set, but you just need to analyze it once. It's okay. It's going to be slow. You set it and forget it for, a couple hours, couple days. But let's say you're in a situation where you have a big data set, maybe 1 million, maybe 100 million rows, and every single night you need to retrain a model on that. Then you're getting into a situation where the compute and the time is really costing you something. And so in finance, we know that 1 million or 100 million may not even be large, right? If you're looking at these brokers or exchanges who have billions of transactions happening every single day, they're trading, hundreds of thousands of instruments. Then you're getting into these massive data sets where they're having to do analysis every single day or hourly, or they need insight on the minute level. And so that's making that pain even more acute.
Right. Yeah, because the reason why I asked, because I was at Fidelity Investments, did enterprise-wide financial reporting and those challenges of the amount of so much data, it's overwhelming from a batch processing standpoint. I'm talking old school now. It was like all overnight processing. Is it going to get done before you wake up in the morning so we can do the reporting? And then you got to run the reporting and you make other subsets. It just takes a long, and you got to schedule it out. We had daily, weekly, and monthly processes, and they all did different things to this massive amounts of financial data across the enterprise so we could roll it up and do all the great reporting. It was a bare. That was like the biggest challenge. It really wasn't. I mean, there were thousands of columns and, terabytes of data. So, and what independent of figuring it out, just running the processes was like, okay, oh, the batch didn't work tonight. Oh no. I'd get called in the middle of the night, I have to get, okay, what are we going to do? So that's why I asked about the amount of data, because for a totally different business reason, a lot of data is hard. It's hard,
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, let's say you have 100 customers or you have 100 transactions. There's not really a good way to analyze that in a privacy preserved form currently. And so, yes, we have the benefits on the efficiency, speed, the massive data set side. But when it comes to privacy, that benefit kicks in from having a handful of individuals. Having a way to enable an external party to explore and to analyze and build models on very private data. It doesn't matter how big the data set is. That true privacy preservation that's mathematically proven is the benefit. So depending on what you're looking for, the benefits kick in at different data sizes.
To your earlier point, data right now is the new oil, right? And very sophisticated financial firms are still figuring out exactly what to do with all this data that they now have access to. Back in the day, they didn't have access to it. So now that they have so much data to process, it's literally clogging up progress, because it takes so long, as Aoife mentioned, it takes so long to compute. So it means that the knowledge, the insights that they can gain from that data are stalled. And it also means the cost associated with just storing the data and computing is also very expensive. Your earlier point in the beginning of this conversation was, well, these challenges are not just finance oriented, right? Lots of different industries are faced with these challenges. We decided to focus on financial services because we identified a number of very important firms and use cases where firms have sort of reached out and said, this is a problem we have, whether it's going from batch to real-time training, whether it's not being able to detect fraud on time, whether it's building more sophisticated trading algorithms. We can help with that just by creating a more efficient way of doing machine learning. So that's sort of the takeaway here, which is it's not like we're building unique machine learning models. We're helping those firms that are already trying to build the newest and greatest models to get there faster and more efficiently and more cost efficiently as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And my first gut reaction to everything all three you said, where were you guys 30 years ago when I needed you? You know what I mean?
I wasn't born.
So it's not Aoife's fault.
You're exempt. Okay. How about Charlie and Ezra? Where were you guys? Come on.
Well, I think that brings up a really interesting point, though, is just like, just putting on our investor hat, right? I mean, I think all of us have sat on the other side of the table as well, to some extent as an investor. And we're thinking about, okay, what are those technologies that, kind of push the needle in the right direction? But then again, every once in a while, there's technology that is a step change. Sometimes these step changes are really hard to come by, but what we believe we have here is a potential for a step change. Now, let me kind of describe a little more context around that, okay? Generally speaking, when you're talking about more accurate, more powerful models, okay, and you hear it all the time when you're talking about the next generation of LLM, Chat 5 is out, blah, blah, blah. How do they achieve that? Typically, they achieve that by throwing more of the same. So more GPUs, more storage, more inputs, more docs, more of everything. So, what was state of the art in terms of 70 billion parameters now is 1.5 trillion parameters in terms of state of the art, for an LLM, as an example. What we've done is we've taken the opposite tact to think about how we can build faster, more efficient, more better performing, more performant models. And that opposite tact really comes down to, what Aoife was describing earlier is, this gem. Well, this gem is not magical. It took a little bit of thought or a lot of bit of thought to get there. But what it is some really creative individuals at the beginning thinking to themselves, okay, what is this machine learning process? Okay, how many steps are involved in building this quote unquote machinery, right, to get predictive models done? And then they figured out, okay, well, if there's hypothetically 10 steps in building this process, how can we short circuit any of these steps? And what was figured out is that you can actually short circuit maybe steps 1 through 7, right? And by doing that, what you're effectively doing is requiring less compute, less storage, less resources to do the same work. And oh, by the way, not only are you requiring less of everything, you're doing everything much more quickly. And so that is the power of, thinking about things differently. And that's kind of, where we came about in what we're doing.
Yeah, I joke about the 30-year part because, you don't know until you know, right? And until you get to that stage. Like, Ezra and I were on, landlines talking, you guys probably not, right? So, yeah, you don't know until you know, until things evolve and cultures and thoughts and the size of the data. So, yeah. But, you are definitely hitting a sweet spot in so many areas of what you're focused on. Please come back to part 2 with the Gemsen team as they go deeper into how they got their original idea for Gemsen and how they collaborate and learn in the fintech ecosystem. Thank you for listening to What the Heck Fintech. Make sure you tune into our next episode as we continue to interview fintech leaders and share real-world stories from across the fintech ecosystem so you can fully understand that fintech is fin life.